Good morning, everyone. Our group will present tax audit and investigation.
And this is our member's name. There are two topics that we will discuss after this. First is tax audit and second is tax investigation.
For the introduction part, tax audit is defined as a primary activity or examination that performed by Inland Revenue Board of Malaysia on the business records and financial affairs of a taxpayer. It is to ensure that the correct amount of income is declared and the correct amount of tax is calculated and paid in accordance with tax laws and regulation. There are two types of audit, which are tax audit and field audit. For the tax audit, it is conducted at the IRBM office. Tax audit usually with respect to simple issues or tax easy adjustment or break correspondence. Taxpayer will be called for an interview at the IRBM office by the letter or email requesting them to come to IRBM office. Tax audit involves checking all information on income and expenses as well as various types of claims made by a taxpayer in his income tax return. Next, for the field audit, which takes place at a taxpayer's premise. It is involved an inspection of the taxpayer's business record. Before the field audit being performed, IRBM will provide the notice to taxpayers. If the taxpayer's business records are incomplete, it is possible involve the examination of non-business records such as personal bank statements. Taxpayer need to provide a valuable information about the other large business activities and the level of compliance among companies. Field audit can take from a few days to weeks depending on the size of the business. Next, audit compliance. There are 4 compliance strategies that provided by Inland Revenue Board. First is to provide positive assistance for compliance through taxpayer support and education. Second, to reduce the likelihood of non-compliance through increased compliance checks. Third, to provide disincentive for non-compliance through enforcement. Fourth, to prevent non-compliance through well-publicized criminal prosecution. This strategy is vital for the successful implementation of the self-assessment system. One of the important programs undertaken by IRB is to educate public about the importance of complying with tax laws and regulation. Audit process can be explained into 3 stages, which are pre-audit stage, during tax audit stage, and post-audit stage. For the pre-audit stage, activities involved is selecting taxpayers, whereby taxpayers will be notified of tax audit exercise and selecting taxpayer teams. A tax audit regularly commences with the Inland Revenue Boards of Malaysia's request for documents and information letter or notifications of audit letter. For certain tax audit cases, no letter will be issued. Instead, a notice of assessment together with tax audit adjustment. Meanwhile, for field audit, a taxpayer might be informed via email or a letter if a tax audit visit their premise. Second stage is during the tax audit stage, whereby Inland Revenue Service agents will assess and determine the accuracy of declared income. If inaccuracy had been detected, the taxpayer has to make a decision whether to make a voluntary declaration before they initiate the audit. Inland Revenue Service agent need to ensure tax declared sufficiently reflect the actual earnings and no outstanding tax liabilities. Any flaw in the income declaration will invite a more detailed examination of the taxpayer's accounts and tax declaration. The last stage is post-audit stage, whereby activities involved are collection and appeal procedure, including payments, objections, and appeals by taxpayers. Upon completion of the tax audit review, the IRBM will issue a report on their tax audit findings. Taxpayer will be given 18 days to respond by submitting an official objection letter together with the additional supporting documents and evidence. If no adjustment, IRBM will issue a tax clearance letter to the taxpayer. If there is adjustment, Notice of assessment or additional assessment will be issued for the finalization of a tax audit.
The selection criteria in tax audits. Tax audits are designed to detect possible tax income that has not been disclosed. This often has two forms, which is income that is understated and deductions that are overstated. With limited resources, it is not possible for the IRB to audit all taxpayers. They pick tax returns that are most likely to earn income or have the most potential for error for evaluation during the tax audit process. They are using the automated system for random selection process based on risk analysis parameters. However, additional grounds for non-computerized selection are also considered. The reason for being chosen for audit is not disclosed to the taxpayer who has been chosen for tax audit. According to Lembaga Hasil Dalam Negeri Malaysia in Section 4, the primary goal of tax audit is to encourage voluntary compliance with tax rules and regulations and to guarantee a greater tax compliance rate under the self-assessment system. In this regard, the audit officer is responsible for ensuring that the proper amount of income has been declared and that the appropriate amount of tax has been paid in compliance with tax rules and regulations. Regarding the assessment in Section 5 of LHDN, it has covered the tax audit, which normally comprises a period of assessment of 1 year, as determined by the department's audit focus criteria. However, if concerns are discovered during an audit, the tax audit may be extended to include up to 5 years of assessment. Furthermore, this 5-year time restriction doesn't apply to situations involving intentional or inadvertent fraud and tax evasion. If an underestimate or omission of income is detected during an audit, a penalty will be applied under paragraph 113, subsection 2 of the ITS 1967. According to LHDN on Section 10 of Offences and Penalties, if an audit reveals that there was an underestimate or omission of income, a penalty will be imposed under Section 113, subsection 2 or paragraph 44B, subsection 7B of the ITA.
Tax investigation is an inquiry into the tax activities of a taxpayer by the tax authority to recover undercharged taxes from previous years, triggered on the suspicion of fraud or willful default of the taxpayer with regards to non-compliance with tax obligations. Two individuals that involved in these tax investigations are tax officer and taxpayer. The next part is the responsibility of tax officer and taxpayer. Tax officer is defined as a government official whose job is to make sure that people and companies are paying the right amount of tax. An investigation officer must adhere to rules and code of ethics drawn up by Inland Revenue Board of Malaysia and is required to carry out duties in the following manner. First, professional, well-mannered, trustworthy, honest, and with integrity. Second, always ready to give explanations on the objective of investigation and the rights and responsibilities of taxpayer. Third, knowledgeable and fair in administering tax laws. Fourth, respect the rights and responsibilities of the taxpayer and tax agent or representative. Next, taxpayer may be an individual or business entity that is obligated to pay tax to a federal, state, or local government. There are 5 responsibilities of taxpayer, which are: first, to provide the investigation officers with access to and make copies. Second, permit investigation officers to take possessions of records. And third, where records and documents are maintained in a language other than national language. Fourth, to provide complete response for requests of information either in writing or orally. And lastly, cooperate with the investigation officers.
Regarding the surrendering of documentation to tax investigation officer, there are 5 processes that need to be made, which is the first one is the request for documents and information from the taxpayer, tax agent, and the third party. The taxpayer may be required to give information and oral explanation at IRBM offices. IRBM officers may also visit taxpayers' business premise with written notification given prior to the visit. Secondly, inspection visit. The inspection visit can be made without a notice to the taxpayer's business premises, residences, tax agent's premises, third parties, and other premises as may be necessary. The inspection will be conducted in a professional and ethical manner. During inspection, an IRBM officer is required to introduce himself and show the authority card, inform the purpose of the visit to the taxpayer, and they need to read and explain to the taxpayer or representative or resident of the premises about the under Section 80. Third is examination of documents. During examination of documents, IRBM officer will inspect taxpayers' business documents and or personal documents. The inspection is to gather evidence of tax evasion and request any party to produce documents in his custody or control. Fourth, the record statement. At least there are 2 IRBM officers will be present during the recording of statement from persons related to the case being investigated. A qualified lawyers can be present during the recording of statements. Lastly, finalization of investigation. After completion of the investigation procedures, IRBM will issue a letter to the taxpayer confirming the finalization of the investigation. If a settlement is agreed upon, an agreement or letter of undertaking will be signed. The investigation is considered finalized after the case is approved by the Director General of Inland Revenue and assessment is raised. Taxpayers who have been investigated will be monitored by the IRBM. If the taxpayer doesn't agree with the investigation findings, the DGIR may, according to the best of his judgment, raise an assessment with penalty. Cases which are to be prosecuted will be forwarded to the legal department. Failure of a taxpayer to attend court proceedings after summon has been served may result in a warrant of arrest being issued. Regarding the tax negotiation, there are 3 key elements discovered in study of negotiation, which are that negotiation is a two-way exchange of information. Each negotiating partner analyzes material from their own perspective, and final agreement is obtained by joint selection. Tax discussions take place during the tax audit period, when the tax authorities propose concessions as a result of the tax audit visit. If the tax audit results are conclusive after the tax audit visit, regardless of the taxpayers or tax practitioners' response, for example, no tax negotiation, the taxpayer or tax practitioner appears to be in a weak position. Individuals and tax professionals are dissatisfied as a result, which may influence their tax compliance behavior. As a result, bargaining is an important part of any tax audit since it facilitates communication between taxpayers, tax practitioners, and tax authorities. There are several assessment rates and penalties in tax investigation, which are the failure to provide an income tax return will result in 200 ringgit to 20,000 ringgit or imprisonment or both if convicted, or 300% of the tax payable. Second, the failure to provide income tax returns for 2 years assessment or more will result in a fine of 1,000 ringgit to 20,000 ringgit or imprisonment or both, and 300% of the tax liability or the tax of payable. Next, making an incorrect tax return by omitting or understating any income or providing incorrect information will result 1,000 ringgit to 10,000 ringgit and 200% of tax undercharge or 100% of tax undercharge. Fourth, willfully and intentionally evade tax or assist any other person to evade tax will result 1,000 ringgit to 20,000 ringgit or imprisonment above and 300% of tax undercharge. Fifth, the attempt to leave the country without payment of tax will result 200 ringgit to 20,000 ringgit or imprisonment or both on conviction. 6. The late payment of tax liability under an assessment for a year assessment will result 10% of tax payable. Late payment of tax installment will result 10% of outstanding tax installment amount. Furthermore, the underestimation of tax estimate for a year's assessment by more than 30% of actual tax payable will result 10% of the difference exceeding 30% of the actual tax payable. A failure to furnish country-by-country report will result 20,000 ringgit to 100,000 ringgit or imprisonment or both on conviction.
To conclude our presentations, the purpose of tax audit is to determine whether reports filed with the taxing authorities are correct and in accordance with tax laws and regulations. Taxpayer need to give full cooperation as well as tax agent also need to carry out his duties professionally and guide the selected taxpayer during the tax audit. It is recommended for the tax audit process and tax investigation to be well clarified to help the taxpayers with better understanding and to avoid penalties due to tax incompliance. That's all from us. Thank you.